What's up, everybody? Matt Gajeski here, back again with the Stokastic DFS channel. And today we're talking Week 11 college football. It's Tuesday. We've got Maction, a 3-game slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you today by Prize Picks. And if you've never heard of Prize Picks, they are daily prop-based offerings. You're making lineups with player props, overs, and unders. You can use college football where you could do passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, but you can also do other sports. They have NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, you name it, they likely have it. And you can mix and match in your lineups. You can mix college football props with NHL if that is what you know. And if you click the link in the video description below, you are going to get a match deposit bonus up to $100 and 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. This is for new users, but make sure to go check out Prize Picks today. Let's dive into the slate. It's 3 games. We'll get into this quickly. All of your game environment stuff is up at the top, so check out the video if you're listening to this on podcast to see pace, pass rate, offensive, defensive line interactions, where defenses are allowing production. All of that is available. But our first game, we've got Eastern Michigan taking on Akron. And a reminder, this is not for the faint of heart. Issue at the top with the spread. Eastern Michigan's a 7-point favorite. We'll correct it on the back end. Haven't had a chance to really go in and take a look at this yet today with everything going on behind the scenes. But Eastern Michigan is the 7-point favorite. The total's 57. Pace in the game should be pretty decent. The over's taking a lot of money here. Eastern Michigan 73rd. They pass the ball only 45% of the time. Akron's 28th in pace. They're passing about 62% of the time, mainly due to game script. But Eastern Michigan has begun using 2 quarterbacks. Taylor Powell was the starter to begin the year. He got hurt. Austin Smith started a game. In their most recent contest they both played, they are vastly different players. Taylor Powell is a pure pocket passer. He has negative 108 rushing yards this year. Austin Smith, the polar opposite, he has 238 rushing yards this year. He's essentially a pure dual threat. Both of them should play in this game. Really renders either one tough to play overall. In the backfield, Samson Evans has handled a pretty solid workload, at least in his 2 most recent healthy games. 4 games ago, 24 carries. Then third most recent game, he got hurt after just 4. Didn't play in the second most recent game, and then returned in their most recent for 24 carries again. He also has really solid target numbers in those 2 games where he was fully healthy. Most recently, we're talking 2 targets, 3 targets, accounting for 26 touches and 27 touches. Samson Evans is a top 2 running back play on this slate, given the game script and Akron's defensive woes. We also have pretty good receivers for Eastern Michigan. The only worry I have here is with more Austin Smith playing, it likely means less volume for Hassan Beydoun, Tanner New, and Dylan Drummond. Those are your top 3. No questions asked. They're really the only guys on the field. And I think if you're ranking them, it's probably Beydoun 1, Tanner New 2, and then Drummond 3. That's just based on a very large sample, multiple year sample of having these guys as the top 3 receivers. They did use Darius Lassiter a fair amount, but even just the last 2 weeks, his route rate has been 34%, 60%. Everyone else was above 80%. Eastern Michigan does run 4 wide more than most teams, so Lassiter, he is in play as that last piece of the offense, but I would rather just find the salary for Beydoun, New, and Drummond. Akron, DJ Irons, signal caller here. He's a pretty good dual threat. A lot of volume for Irons too, so there's a potential for him to really backdoor his way into productive games anytime. He's averaging 278 passing yards per game on 40 attempts, 282 rushing yards, so he's got great mobility here. Irons is in play as a salary saver on both platforms. The backfield here is key. You have a committee between Clyde Price and Cam Wiley, and they're both a stone minimum on DraftKings. I think I prefer Clyde Price because of the receiving work. He's averaged 5 targets per game over the last 4 games, 3.5 targets per game on the year. He's kind of the glue in your lineups that allows you to play studs everywhere else. So I expect Clyde Price to draw some ownership. Cam Wiley would be direct leverage off of him. It is about a 60-40 split in favor of Price, maybe 65-35. Receiving game, we've got Shockey Jacques Louis, Pitt transfer, averaging 9.3 targets per game, 84 yards on the year. And His targets have jumped to 12.3 per game over the last 4. He's a rock solid play on DraftKings specifically. Daniel George is averaging 9 targets per game and 9.3 targets per game in the last 4. He's the stone minimum. He's another rock solid play here. I'm probably going to end up playing one of these guys. And even Alex Adams, 7.4 targets per game on the year, 9 targets per game in the last 3 contests. These are your 3 main pass catchers. It's Shockey, Jacques Louis, Daniel George, and Alex Adams. There's a ton of volume here for these guys to be so cheap overall. Routes are balanced heavily in their favor. All of them have a route rate north of 85% in the last, 6 games. It's incredibly condensed. I think you clearly want to play these. Nearly 10 targets per game. Ohio takes on Miami, Ohio game 2. 2-point spread in favor of the Bobcats, a 50.5 total overall. This game leaves a lot to be desired in terms of pace. Ohio's 100th. Miami, Ohio's 122nd. Ohio does throw the ball a lot, and they've been really efficient. Curtis Rourke, maybe the number 1 quarterback on the board just on pure efficiency. 230 rushing yards on the year. He's averaging 303 per game on just 33.5 attempts. He's the most efficient quarterback in the MAC to this point. Really solid step forward for Curtis Rourke this year. He's playable without doubt. The backfield's a mess. Saya Bangura missed their last game. No update on his status. Nolan McCormick got injured in the first half. No update on his status. That put Jake Netherton into almost a full-time role. 13 carries for him in their most recent game. This is a pure wait and see. And I don't even know if we get updates. Like last week, Say Bangura was ruled out after kickoff. This is a slate not for the faint of heart, as the MAC typically is. The philosophy is you hope you're on the positive side of these injury situations more often than not, but this is a dart throw. Bangura is the lead back when healthy. If he's out, Nolan McCormick is the lead back. If he's out, 7.7 targets per game, 80 yards per game. You're finding better value with the Akron guys, honestly, but efficiency should be in favor of Wiglets here. So I think he's a solid play overall. It's not the most voluminous role as you might think. I think he's going to come in pretty owned, and I might pivot. I'm not sure yet. Outside of him, you've got Miles Cross and James Bostic as the 2 and the 3. I think it's pretty clear here in both targets and routes overall. And then you've got Jacoby Jones as the clear wide receiver 4. His routes have been in decline, so I think we can feel pretty confident about the top 3 guys here. In their most recent game, you had a 34% route share for Jones, a 75% route share for Bostic, and an 84% route share for both Cross and Wiglets. Makes things pretty easy to decipher. Tight end, also a rotation here, not a spot to really spend much time on. Miami, Ohio, 122nd in pace, 42% pass rate. This is probably going to change. Brett Gabbert is back. He's starting. They had the polar opposite Avion Smith under center when he was out. Avion Smith is a pure dual threat. Brett Gabbert is a pocket passer. I think this needs to be adjusted pass rate overall. So Gabbert, you can't really take much from a sample this year because of the injury, but I think he's a middling passer overall, low volume offense, but his efficiency has been okay in his career. He's only 7K, so I think pure tournament viability here for the most part. The backfield's a 4-way committee consisting of Keon Mosey, Tyree Shelton, Kevin Davis, and Kenny Tracy. It's a complete disaster. Kevin Davis and Kenny Tracy are the main pass-catching backs. The other guys are more early down grinders. I don't really see much of a reason to play someone in this 4-way committee. The receiving game, Mac Hippenhammer is the wide receiver 1. 7 targets for him on the year. That's per game. 52 yards per game as well. Hippenhammer, clearly the 1. Then they lost Jalen Walker. This is another situation where you're probably not going to get an update on his status before kickoff. So play him if you want to take the risk. He's the number 2 receiver for this team on the year for the most part, at least target-wise. Miles Marshall played more in his stead. And one thing this team did, instead of using a 3rd receiver, once Walker went down, is they started using 2 running backs. Kenny Tracy and I guess, who was it? Who's the target leader? Kevin Davis. These are the two. Sorry, I had to look up the routes. Those are the two on the field more than the other backs, but it was more two-back sets for this team in passing situations. Jack Calderon is their tight end. He mixes time a little bit here, but the player personnel got a little messed up without Jalen Walker. They clearly do not feel great about the receivers. I just pulled up the routes so we can read them. It was Hippenhammer 97%, Miles Marshall 79, Jack Calderon 72, but then you had Kevin Davis at 66 and Kenny Tracy at 52. So a lot of overlap between the running backs, and that wasn't it. Like Tyree Shelton 16%, Keon Mosey 19%. So there were a lot of two-back sets for this team in passing situations. Makes it pretty tough outside of Miles Marshall and Matt Hippenhammer. Not the best offense, in my opinion, for DFS, but I'll be taking a few shots on Hippenhammer and particularly Brett Gabbert. Forgot to rename this on the bottom. As you can see, we're a little behind today. It's not Iowa, Purdue. It's Ball State, Toledo. I'll fix this on the back end. A couple things to fix, as you can see. Ball State, they're 11-point underdogs to Toledo here, 50-point total. Both these teams are fast. I think the total is depressed because DeQuan Finn has a bit of an injury situation we'll talk about. Start with Ball State, where they play really fast, 9th in pace, 54% pass rate, but they're very inefficient. It's a one-read offense for John Paddock. He's been inefficient to start the year. Can't run. He has negative 47 rushing yards. And then his passing yards per game sit at 250. It's on 41 attempts. So he's a volume-based GPP play. I think he's kind of in that second tier behind Irons and Finn if we get him to play. We'll see on that in Rourke. The running back field here, Carson Steele, clear lead back. He's averaging 27 touches per game, 119 rushing yards per game, and he's involved in the pass game as well. He averages another 15 yards there. He's just a lock and load play. He's the kind of guy where no matter what his ownership is, he's probably under-owned. The receiving game, Ja'Shawn Jackson, he's had a monstrous workload recently, and he has 9 carries in the year. He saw 16 targets last week. He's now averaging 12 targets per game over the last 4. Very clearly ahead of Heinz Tyler, who is the wide receiver 2. Price difference on DraftKings isn't drastic enough where I want to go down and play Tyler. I'm going to play Jackson if I can find the salary. And then this team is basically 12 personnel almost all the time. It's Tanner Koziel and Brady Hunt. Brady Hunt's 3,400. He's averaging 5.3 targets per game in the last 4 games. He's quietly viable near the stone minimum. I prefer the Akron guys, but for those of you stacking this game or punting or looking for just a leverage play, Brady Hunt is somewhat live at tight end. Prefer him to Koziel overall. And then Toledo. DeQuan Finn, questionable for this game. He's still listed with the out tag on DraftKings. That's not true. Maybe it is, but the word from the coaching staff, this was the quote. DeQuan Finn did not practice last week. They did not feel comfortable about him getting into the game, so they started Tucker Gleason. They've now had about a week and a half additionally to get DeQuan Finn healthy. We just flat out don't know if he's going to play. There hasn't been any update. So if he plays, he's the best dual threat on the slate. 520 rushing yards. He averages 205 yards per game as a passer. DeQuan Finn is awesome. If he doesn't play, expect him to be a little more run heavy, but Tucker Gleason is still viable at his price. He has 53 rush yards. You can't really take much from his passing stats, but he played well in the absence of Finn in their most recent games. So I think Gleason's still fine for tournaments. Clearly, Finn, the better play overall for DFS. The backfield, they had been using a 3-way committee all year, but they kind of got Micah Kelly out. I don't know if this was an injury. There was literally no word on injuries. I scoured the internet for potential Micah Kelly news, but he only had 1 carry, no targets. That was abnormal for Kelly, but because of that, Jock Stewart and Penny Boone had larger roles. These guys would be more in play if we didn't just have absurd Akron value. So, you're playing timeshare backs. I would rather play like straight up the Eastern Michigan back and the Ball State back. But, for tournaments, Jock Stewart and Penny Boone are semi-viable, I think. They're cheap. Probably leads you to different construction because a lot of people will be punting all the way with Akron, I'm guessing. In the receiving game, Demir Blankumsey has missed 3 out of the last 4 games. No idea if he plays. This is another, you're probably not going to get news on Toledo's injuries. Just expect this from Matt Games, not for the faint of heart. Without him, Jerwan Newton's the 1. Devin Maddox should be the 2. Don't think there's too much volatility there. They've rotated receivers a lot, but these are not guys that are really involved in that much. You have Jerwan Newton with 100% route rate in back-to-back games. Devin Maddox was at 83% last week. He was at 57 the week before, so maybe a little volatility. But honestly, the second most consistent route getter has been tight end Jamal Turner, who's above 70% in 3 straight games. Last week, you did see Michael Barkley with an 83% route rate, which was a big jump for him. He hadn't been above 65% in any game this year, but that came directly because of Blankumsey. If Blankumsey returns, I wouldn't expect Barkley to be this involved. Then everyone else is just pretty nasty rotations. It's actually a little cut and dry for Toledo, more than you'd expect. Jerwan Newton 1, Maddox 2, Blankumsey 3 if healthy. If not, Barkley 3, Jamal Turner at that tight end playing the consistent role here. But that'll do it for us today. I'll go on the back end, clean this up. Need to clean up a couple things. Get ready for the max slate tomorrow. Busy start to the week with college basketball returning, which we also have projections for. Check those out. I'm running those. But let me know in the comment section what you think about the plays, what you think about the game breakdowns. I'll make sure to get back to you. If you'd like to reach out, I'm available on Twitter at @Matt_Kajeski. Otherwise, good luck tonight, guys. We'll see you again tomorrow.